An affluent teenager derided his black educator before the entire class, yet her subsequent actions took everyone, especially him, completely by surprise. "Seriously, who reads this anymore?" The remark originated from the classroom's rear, pointed, disdainful and overly assured for a student new to the school that very week. Ms. Evelyn Reed stopped writing, chalk poised, turning from the blackboard. The speaker was Ethan Vanderbilt, 16, looking arrogant, arms folded across an expensive designer hoodie, reclining as if he owned the premises and was merely inspecting his property. Scattered laughter followed, not from humor, but because it was Ethan, the new, wealthy white student accustomed to commanding attention. Ethan then projected his voice, imitating a pronounced southern drawl, her drawl, and then the small, enslaved boy replied, "Yes, master, I'll gather that." "Cotton swiftly, master." He bent over laughing, proud, as if delivering a killer stand-up routine. A few more students laughed uneasily this time. Ms. Reed remained silent. She stood perfectly still, like a sculpture, apart from her eyes. A fire burned within them, not of fury, but something more profound that silenced the room instantly. There was no shouting, no dramatic book slamming, no dispatch to the principal's office. She simply pivoted, returned to her desk, retrieved a notebook, clicked her pen, and stated, "Ethan." His name drifted through the air lightly, but hit with substantial force. "You will remain after class concludes today." He smirked insolently. For what purpose? Lifting her gaze, she offered a faint smile. "To commence your assignment." Confusion rippled through the class. No assignment had been mentioned, none they were aware of, yet no one dared inquire when Ms. Reed employed that particular tone, a tone that didn't request focus, but demanded it through sheer conviction, not loudness. Ethan muttered, "Fine," though a subtle tremor in his voice hinted his perceived control over the situation was faltering. 10 minutes later, the dismissal bell sounded. A rush ensued. Bags zipped, footwear squeaked across the floor. Glances darted everywhere but avoided Ethan. He remained in his seat, observing her, anticipating the reprimand, the expected disciplinary action. However, she accessed her top drawer, withdrawing an unadorned folder, unmarked, unlabeled, simply aged manila paper, softened by time. She pushed it toward him across the desk. "Open this upon returning home, not sooner. Return tomorrow with your conclusion." His eyes narrowed. "Conclusion to what?" She met his gaze directly. "Regarding whether you wish to continue the charade, or if you're prepared to encounter something genuine." A brief, scoffing laugh escaped him. "Ma'am, I've attended 3 different institutions this past year. You believe I lack real-world experience." "You've experienced wealth," she countered, her tone still gentle, "not authenticity." The folder lay between them, charged like an exposed wire. Ethan made no move to touch it, merely leaning back, attempting to stare her down, expecting her to yield. She did not. For the first time in quite a while, Ethan Vanderbilt found himself without a retort. Yet, before deciding its fate, discard or explore, he would discover Ms. Reed's seriousness and the length she would go to impart an unforgettable lesson. Ethan refrained from opening the folder that evening. He casually threw it onto his marble-topped desk within his expansive Buckhead, Georgia bedroom, where lights adjusted via remote and a seldom-used PS5 resided beneath a 75-inch television. He idly browsed his phone, watched a portion of a video, then silenced it. His gaze returned to the folder, inert, undisturbed, silently waiting. By midnight, restlessness compelled him to pace, though he rationalized it wasn't anxiety. He couldn't dismiss her expression, the composure, the self-assurance, her utter lack of reaction to his mockery. He had witnessed teachers weep, shout, flush with anger, become overwhelmed. Ms. Reed hadn't even perspired. This fact irritated him. He arrived early the following day, not intending to apologize or even converse. His sole purpose was observation, to discern the source of this instructor's influence over the student body, as their fondness for her was evident. Traversing the corridors, students greeted her as if she were a luminary, driven by respect, not apprehension. Upperclassmen offered fist bumps. Younger students smiled and waved. Fellow educators acknowledged her with genuine, not perfunctory nods. Taking his usual seat at the back, arms crossed, he noted she neither called upon nor acknowledged him, continuing her lecture as if he were mere background scenery. Strangely, the subject matter held merit. They were analyzing The Souls of Black, Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. Yet her discussion extended beyond the text, delving into the individuals, the historical setting, the underlying humanity. The students were captivated. Ethan observed a classmate, perhaps named Kevin, leaning forward, absorbing every utterance. The realization dawned. This wasn't merely a lesson. It was her domain, her environment, governed by her standards. Impressively, without ever elevating her voice, she commanded the space authoritatively. He lingered after class once more, the folder remaining unopened in his backpack. Ms. Reed forbore asking. Instead, she presented another envelope. This, she informed him, represents your subsequent phase, should you be committed. I haven't. Examined the initial item. The decision rests with you. He rolled his eyes disdainfully. Is this some sort of amusement for you? Her gaze was unwavering. No, this constitutes effort. The type of effort you've been spared because individuals, like myself, undertook it for you. Her tone contained no bitterness, only stark reality. That evening, Ethan finally investigated the folder's contents. It held a single black and white photograph, an elderly gentleman in a threadbare suit seated on a park bench. Below, one name, Silas Jones. On the reverse, a concise instruction. Locate him, listen without phone or recorder. Simply yourself, a notepad, and receptive ears. However, Ethan was unprepared for Mr. Silas Jones's revelations and the profound impact they would have, surpassing any previous disciplinary consequence. Ethan declined a chauffeured ride that Saturday. He bypassed his father's driver, the imposing, matte black Escalade, and all familiar comforts. He opted for the municipal bus route, adhering to the directive. 2 transfers were necessary. The final stop deposited him near the periphery of South DeKalb, Georgia, an area devoid of chic boutiques or gourmet burger restaurants, characterized instead by weathered structures, faded signage, and sidewalks, fissured like sun-scorched earth. 3 blocks later, he recognized the bench depicted in the photograph. There sat the man, identical suit, bearing and gaze. Mr. Silas Jones, 84, his skin resembling worn leather, yet possessing remarkably sharp eyes for a retiree. Ethan approached tentatively. Mr. Jones? The elder remained motionless. Are you the young man Evelyn sent? Ethan hesitated. Yes, possibly. No possibilities. You are or you are not, Ethan affirmed. I am. Mr. Jones finally shifted, his gaze upward. Be seated. He complied. No preliminary conversation, no niceties, only quietude. Then the question, has a grown man, knowing your name, ever addressed you as boy? Ethan shrugged dismissively. Not particularly. I have, Mr. Jones stated flatly. 53 times before I reached 16. 38 of those instances involved men in uniform. Ethan felt speechless and remained so. I participated in a march with King once, Mr. Jones went on. Just once. A police officer struck me across the ribs with a nightstick. I never marched thereafter. That didn't equate to ceasing the struggle. I simply adopted shrewder methods, organizing from within. Ethan leaned closer, his interest finally piqued. Ms. Reed suggested I listen. Mr. Jones offered a slight, knowing smirk. Indeed, that lady possesses more wisdom in her little finger than many have in their entirety. You provoked her, correct? Ethan lowered his gaze. I didn't anticipate any real consequence, he mumbled. Mr. Jones emitted a slow, gravelly chuckle. She wasn't required to act directly. She dispatched me. He retrieved a folded, yellowed, fragile paper from his coat pocket. It was an aged newspaper clipping, local youth triumphs in state debate, urges curriculum to include black writers. The image was indistinct, yet unmistakably her, a 17-year-old Evelyn with substantial spectacles and a determined expression. She's been championing this cause longer than your lifetime, son. Ethan traced the paper's surface. She's unusual, he remarked. Incorrect, Mr. Jones countered. You're merely accustomed to educators who permit your misconduct. Their conversation spanned nearly 2 hours. Mr. Jones recounted his mother's dismissal following her advocacy at a PTA meeting, the 5-mile trek to the segregated black school because the bus bypassed their stop, the clanging sound of metal. Chains within jail cells, where he and 50 others were confined for staging a lunch counter sit-in. History, Mr. Jones asserted, isn't merely facts for an examination. It's a burden carried upon one's shoulders, within one's very being, acceptance notwithstanding. Upon departing, the folder felt substantially weightier in Ethan's grasp. The ensuing Monday, he entered the classroom ahead of schedule. Ms. Reed was already inscribing notes onto the blackboard. Ethan gently placed the folded clipping from Mr. Jones onto her desk, treating it as though it were sacrosanct. She turned. Silence passed between them. She offered a brief nod, not signifying approval, but simple recognition. He returned to his desk. As the bell signaled the start of class, she commenced the lesson as usual. No reference to the weekend encounter, no commendation. However, a fresh envelope rested on his desk, smaller this time, bearing only a destination: Birmingham, Alabama. Civil Rights Institute. Saturday, 10:30 a.m. This encounter, however, would transcend a simple bench dialogue. The experience awaiting Ethan possessed the capacity to unsettle him profoundly, dismantling defenses he hadn't realized existed. Ethan remained largely silent during the 3-hour journey to Birmingham. His father had proposed the private aircraft. Even the Bentley, Ethan declined. He chose the Greyhound bus. He sought solitude, detachment, and perhaps, subconsciously, anonymity. He reached his destination shortly after 10 a.m., the sun reflecting intensely off the stone steps of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. A security officer directed him to a side entrance. Clearly, his arrival was anticipated. The environment was cool, hushed, and somber. Each corridor seemed to murmur histories. Every photograph appeared to observe him intently. He located Ms. Reed near the primary exhibit entrance. Her attire was unassuming. Denim trousers, a simple blue top, a crossbody satchel. No instructional materials. Just her presence. You made it, she observed. Ethan confirmed with a nod. I did. Understand, this is not a guided tour nor a school excursion. No extra points are awarded. No assessment follows. Understood. She appraised him briefly before proceeding. Ethan trailed behind. They passed the authentic portal from the Birmingham City Jail, the very door behind which Martin Luther King Jr. penned his renowned letter from a Birmingham jail. The atmosphere felt palpable. Their progress halted before a display case containing a solitary, fire-damaged church shoe. Miss Reed offered no commentary. Ethan examined the accompanying inscription: property of Clara Mae Jenkins, one of 4 young girls tragically killed during the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, September 15, 1963. He fixated on the shoe, not due to its horrific context, but its diminutive childlike size. merely a shoe damaged at the sole, coated in grime. It seemed an unlikely vessel for such immense sorrow, yet it undeniably held it. "Her age?" Ethan inquired softly. 14. He averted his gaze. They continued. Further exhibits, additional names: Emmett Till, Viola Liuzzo, Medgar Evers, Bayard, Rustin. Each name evoked an image, a voice, an individual, a narrative. "This," Ms. Reed stated, her tone neither severe nor irate, merely factual, "is the subject of your jest." Ethan felt a constriction in his throat. "I was ignorant," he stammered. "No, you chose ignorance." They proceeded into the movement gallery, its walls adorned with depictions of high-pressure water hoses assaulting demonstrators, police canines attacking, protesters pinned face down, blood staining the pavement. A video monitor displayed an older black woman addressing the camera. Ethan watched intently. She recounted her attempt to register her son at an exclusively white school in 1961, navigating past jeering throngs, clasping her child's hand amidst spitting aggressors. Ethan turned towards Ms. Reed. "That was you," she affirmed. "Why wasn't this shared with the class?" "Because their comprehension of the truth doesn't necessitate exposure to my personal suffering. Yours, however, did." A quiet pause ensued. For the very first occasion since his enrollment, Ethan shed his performative facade. The sarcasm vanished, the detachment dissipated. He was genuinely absorbing. She offered him a small, blank-lined notebook. Its purpose? Begin documenting anything, everything, your responses, inquiries, the self-deceptions you've maintained, concepts you never challenged until this moment. He handled the notebook as if it were fragile. "I haven't engaged in this previously," he confessed, "precisely why it's necessary." Later, they sat together in the courtyard, wordlessly. She drank tea from a thermos flask. He opened the notebook, contemplating the empty page. At last, he inscribed, "I once perceived history as tedious because it seemed irrelevant to my existence." Following that, he added, "Perhaps it was relevant, perhaps perpetually so. I simply refuse to acknowledge its connection." He kept his writings private for the time being. During the return bus journey, Ethan observed the passing landscape through the window, his attention diverted from his phone and his own reflection. The world appeared altered. Graffiti on an overpass, a John Lewis mural adorning a brick facade, a street sign bearing a previously unnoticed name. He retrieved the notebook, composing 3 additional pages before the bus departed Alabama. That subsequent Monday, he arrived in class 5 minutes early. He requested permission to read something aloud. A hush fell over the room. Even Ms. Reed inclined her head curiously. Ethan stood, presented his notebook and read, "My prior belief was superiority over the individuals chronicled in our textbooks owing to my wealth and perceived opportunities. I now recognize they possessed something beyond monetary value. They embodied the lesson, and my arrogance prevented me from learning." Silence reigned, not from apathy, but because, exceptionally, his words conveyed sincerity. However, Ethan's account was incomplete. His forthcoming statement, delivered before the entire class, promised to transform the prevailing quiet into something truly remarkable. Friday morning arrived, and Ms. Reed's classroom buzzed with occupants well before the initial bell. News had circulated. Students not even enrolled in her course had gathered early, occupying the rear wall, conversing in low tones. Anticipation hung heavy regarding Ethan Vanderbilt's planned address. He positioned himself at the classroom's front, clutching a folded paper and his notebook. No visual aids, no elaborate preamble, just himself before peers who merely a week prior anticipated nothing beyond his customary cynicism. He cleared his throat noticeably. "I haven't prepared a formal essay," he announced. "I've composed something different." Miss Reed remained seated at her desk, hands clasped, observing without judgment, simply present. He surveyed the room. "My previous assumption was omniscience. I was mistaken." Opening his notebook, he commenced. "Upon entering this institution, I presumed I was conferring a benefit upon you all. I equated public education with ease, lenient, educators, and jests that wouldn't result in expulsion. Then I encountered Ms. Reed. She refrained from shouting or penalizing. She extended an invitation. She afforded me the opportunity to heed perspectives I had disregarded, interact with individuals I would never have considered, absorb narratives I wouldn't have bothered exploring. Mr. Silas Jones, he confronted me directly, recounting the day his marching ceased due to ribs fractured by a police officer's weapon. He imparted, "This constitutes history, not the textbook variety, but the lived, bled reality." Within the Civil Rights Institute, I witnessed a charred church shoe belonging to a young girl, Clara May. She was 14. A realization struck. My purported joke concerning enslaved people wasn't humorous. It starkly demonstrated my profound ignorance about the world. Candidly, fear paralyzed me. Fear of acknowledging my own lack of knowledge. But Ms. Reed compelled me to observe, and observation irrevocably alters perception. He paused momentarily. The classroom remained utterly still. Even the typically boisterous students sat in rapt silence. Ethan lifted his eyes from the text. "I formerly equated power with dominating volume. That's erroneous. True power resides in listening and permitting that act to foster personal transformation." He folded the sheet, secured it within his notebook, and resumed his seat. Applause did not follow, not from indifference, but from a collective reluctance to disrupt the gravity of the moment. Ms. Reed rose, approached the front deliberately. Her gaze encompassed the class, excluding him initially. "What you have just observed," she declared, "represents progress, not flawlessness nor absolution, merely a forward movement. Occasionally that suffices." She then addressed Ethan directly, her tone steady. "You've demonstrated that learning is perpetually possible. However, the most challenging phase now commences." He tilted his head inquisitively. "Which is embodying it." She returned to the blackboard, resuming the day's lesson as if normalcy prevailed. The class gradually re-engaged, though some now viewed Ethan through a different lens, not merely the affluent youth with a defiant streak, but as someone who had finally ceased speaking long enough to truly hear. Yet, the narrative hadn't concluded. Following the final bell's chime and the corridors emptying, Ethan had one final exchange, reserved solely for Ms. Reed, face to face. The concluding bell resonated. Zippers secured backpacks, chairs scraped against the floor. Laughter echoed down the hallway like a liberated current. Ethan remained stationary. He lingered until the departure of the final student. Ms. Reed methodically erased the blackboard, her movements measured as usual. He approached her desk, notebook ready. Without looking up, she remarked, "You fulfilled my request. That holds significance." "My purpose wasn't seeking academic merit," he stated. Now her gaze met his. "I came to express gratitude." She sat, interlacing her fingers. "Your actions were courageous," she acknowledged. Ethan demurred with a shake of his head. "No, merely overdue. It should have occurred much earlier. Your upbringing conditioned you to believe your education was complete." His eyes held hers, conveying earnestness. "It isn't finished. I recognize that now." A subtle smile touched her lips. "In that you surpass many adults I encounter." A comfortable silence settled between them, neither strained nor weighty, simply authentic. Ethan extracted a sheet from his notebook, placing it before her. It displayed the newspaper photograph of her younger self, the adolescent with glasses. Beneath it, his inscription read, Thank you for championing an educational space capable of accommodating both truth and compassion." Ms. Reed lifted the paper, perused it thoughtfully, folded it meticulously, and then met his eyes directly. "Significant effort still lies ahead for you." "I understand," he affirmed, "and universal forgiveness won't manifest as readily as it did within this room. I harbor no such expectation." "Excellent." Rising, she moved towards the window, gazing out at the parking area where students embarked for their weekend activities. Without altering her posture, she advised, "Now, validate it, Ethan, through your actions, not solely through rhetoric." He offered no verbal response, simply a nod before turning and exiting, his stride now firmly grounded. For genuine apologies are not merely articulated, they are enacted through living. Often, the most impactful educators are not those who raise their voices, but those who steadfastly maintain their principles, refusing to compromise standards for another's ease. Should this narrative prompt even a moment's reflection, consider who in your own life has attempted to impart wisdom you were unprepared to receive. Perhaps the time for listening has arrived. Conversely, if you occupy a teaching role, emulate the fortitude of Ms. Reed, patient, resolute, and enduringly influential.